Welcome, and I'm really pleased to be able to present today. I'm sorry that I can't actually be there. I want to tell you a story that begins with once upon a time, even though it's not actually a fairy tale. And the story is why I used to be a systems thinker, and fortunately I recovered. In 1976, I read Stafford Beer's Platform for Change, and it was sort of a mind-altering experience because after that I sort of never thought about the world the same, realizing that everything was connected. And things went along fine for a number of years until 1991, when I ran into an article in Scientific American about a piece of software called Stella, developed by one Barry Richmond, which would run on my Macintosh. Now, while I was in college, I got a chance to develop some simulations in GPSS on an IBM 360, which means I'm really dating myself. And that was, like watching paint dry. The Stella allowed one to actually create a simulation on a PC and immediately execute it so that you could see the implications of the relationships. And I was just fascinated. I mean, I just couldn't get enough. And the more I developed, the more I began to realize that, or think that systems thinking was just a not very grown-up version of system dynamics. Fortunately, I ran into something else that straightened my mind out a bit, and that was a rather inappropriate perspective, because I always wondered why it was that we needed hundreds, if not thousands, of models and methods that claimed to embrace the systems paradigm. And fortunately, I ran into Jackson's System of Systems Methodologies, which is a book entitled Systems Thinking Creative Holism for Managers, which is a great book if you can wade through it. And it provided me with a perspective that, you can't simulate a problem that you don't understand. So depending upon the nature of the system or the situation that you're trying to understand, and the nature of all of the relevant participants, it's appropriate to use different kinds of approaches to deal with the situation. And this was all well and good, but then, the thought was, how does anyone ever understand all this stuff? I mean, if you have a problem that you want to approach, you need a dozen specialists in different areas, which costs way too much, takes too long. And it's just too much, which sort of gives me the impression of what I was doing to people for a long time, and that people used to ask me what it was that I did. And as I began to tell them, you could see their eyes glaze over, as they were probably asking themselves, why did I ask, and how the hell do I get him to stop? Because I was creating these, spending days, weeks, sometimes months, crafting these relationship models that I would share with other people, and when they would respond, those that actually responded would come back with things like, well, that's nice. And later I came to realize what they really wanted to say is, why the hell did you send this to me? Because it's incomprehensible. It does nothing except create headaches for someone that actually tries to understand it. And then sort of by accident, in the process of developing a book with Scott Fort Monroe, who is the creator of Insight Maker, I developed a model called We Have a Problem that I'd like to share with you at the moment. I'm sitting at the table in the morning having a pleasant breakfast, and my wife yells down from upstairs, are you finally going to clean up that unsightly growth around the bottom of the bird feeder, because I'm getting tired of looking at it? And when that happens, all of a sudden, this whole set of relationships sort of flashes before my eyes, and I realize how I got myself into this predicament. I typically deal with a lot of frustration on an ongoing basis, and that detracts from a pleasant breakfast. But if I have a pleasant breakfast, it helps me deal with the frustration. And after sitting there having breakfast for a few days, noticing the birds outside on the railing, I sort of thought to myself, well, I like this. Let me go ahead and install a bird feeder, which is typically the extent of someone's thought in this arena. But to look at it a little bit longer, I mean, the bird feeder is intended to attract more birds outside to improve the pleasant breakfast. And also, it's likely to improve the attractiveness of the garden, which attracts more birds, which adds to the pleasant breakfast. And things are absolutely delightful. Though, there's more. The birds at the bird feeder increase the need to buy bird seed, which adds to my frustration, which if you check the price of bird seed these days, you can sort of understand why that's the truth. And the birds at the feeder create spillage, which increases the need to buy bird seed, which also promotes the unsightly growth, which increases my frustration. And the spillage attracts rodents, which I have to figure out how to deal with, which is more frustration. And the bird feeder attracts squirrels, the universal eating machine, which decreases the birds at the feeder and increases the need to buy bird seed, which adds to the frustration, and things are going downhill rapidly. And then the birds are also pooping all over the railing, which I have to figure out how to clean up. What you're looking at is a set of thoughts that ought to go through one's mind before they decide to act, as opposed to afterward, and realizing that they have to deal with all this stuff, all of the supposedly unintended consequences that they never thought about ahead of time. And had I sat down and actually thought about all of this stuff to begin with, I probably wouldn't have installed the bird feeder. And it's along the way, I realized that a model is really a story. It's like a play. It unfolds from one act to another, and the relationships between the actors unfold. And if the play is well done, at the end of the play, people walk away with the understanding of what the story was. And what I was doing was equivalent to walking up, what I used to do was equivalent to walking up to someone, handing them the script for the play, and giving them about 10 minutes and asking them what they thought of the play. It's not possible. So the realization was that it's all about understanding relationships and their implications and how they unfold over time. And what I finally managed, well, when I now develop things and send them to other people, they no longer get things that look like this. They now get things that look like this. So there is the relationship model. There is also a video that unfolds this model step by step and explains it to them, with a place where they can actually ask questions that end up in my mailbox, and access to the presentation itself that was used to develop the video. So I now put together stories that help understand the implications of a set of relationships. So when people now ask me what I do, I don't tell them that I'm a systems thinker. I tell them that I create stories about relationships and their implications. And the response typically is, well, doesn't that sort of relate to everything? And that actually is the curse, because it makes almost everything interesting. It's hard to stay focused because it's all about relationships and their implications. When you think about the difference between the person just learning, learning how to play chess, and the person, the grandmaster, the difference is the extent to which they think ahead about the relationships and their implications, moves after moves after moves. So I now say that I no longer, as I said, I no longer say that I'm a systems thinker. I simply talk about developing relationships and their implications. And I have sort of distilled it all down to a single word, or a single question, and the question is, and. So that given a particular situation, what I do is I ask, and what does this influence, and what influences this? And I continue to ask those two questions as I construct the set of relationships, expanding to attempt to identify all of the ones that are relevant. Now, it's difficult to figure out sometimes which ones are relevant and which ones aren't, so you put some in and you take some out and whatever. And when I get to a point where I can't think of anything, any additional answers based upon what I know, then I sort of wrap it up and send it to some other people to look at and think about, not with an intent of impressing them with how smart I am, because they don't care. More to the fact, more in the hopes that they will ask questions and come up with answers that I simply didn't realize to better develop the relationship model. I mean, the whole intent of the model is to promote understanding, and to the extent to which it does that, it's a good model. So what I offer you is there are, at systemswiki.org, there are 2 self-paced free learning environments, one storytelling with Kumu and one storytelling with Insight Maker, which walks through the process of developing stories in those 2 environments, both of which are web-based free environments for developing relationship models. Insight Maker also allows one to develop simulation models, in addition to just qualitative relationship models. And in the midst of them, if you're going through them and have questions, there are places inside of them where they're laid out to walk you through a sequence. And if you run into a question along the way, if you simply click, there's a place for you to enter a question and it'll show up on my desk. So that's sort of an overview of why it is I no longer tell people that I'm a systems thinker. And now if you want to ask some